So let's go ahead and give some functionality to the user to be able to edit their albums. Now at the moment when we click on the edit link, you can see that we have a broken link because we haven't created the file. So let's go ahead and follow the same procedure as we did with editing. And let's just close menu and albums because we're not going to need them. So let's create a new file, and we're going to save that as edit, well, not in widgets folder, we're going to save that in the root directory as edit album.php. Now we're going to follow the same procedure and include the init.php file. We're also going to include template/header.php, and we're also going to include template/footer.php, and we'll just separate them as usual. Let's create our header up here, and that is edit album. And when we go back and refresh, we now have our page. Now let's go ahead and create our form, which is obviously the one of the most important parts of this this page, because we need to give the user the option to actually edit. The form, the action is not going to be blank, but I'm going to leave it blank for just now. And the method is again going to be post. Let's go down and end the form and start to build our actual fields up. So the name again is the same, we need to break. In actual fact, what we could probably do, just to save a bit of time, is open up createAlbum.php, and we could probably go ahead and just copy this here, okay? Just to save a moment of time. Let's paste that in there and make sure these are aligned properly. Okay, so the only thing we need to change here is edit, and we magically have our edit form, so we can edit the name and the description. Now there's not really much difference now between this file and createAlbum.php. What we need to do is populate these two fields with the values that correspond to the album ID of 56. Remember, when we click on an album, when we click on edit on a particular album, it gives us an ID at the top. Now with this ID, we want to retrieve this number here on our PHP page, and we want to populate the name and the description into here, and then when we edit, we want to actually update this in the database. So the first thing we want to do is find out a way that we can get the name and the description from this ID, and that is where the function, let's go into our file, that's where the function album data comes in. Now album data is extremely similar to the user data function, so what we're going to do is we're simply going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. So if we open up our func folder and open up user.func.php, if we go up, we have this user data function here. I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it into here, but there's obviously things that we need to change. The first thing that we need to change is the table that we're retrieving the data from, and this is albums, and where user ID equals session ID, we need to make a change just before here. We need to say where album ID is equal to, and the album ID that we pass through here, because obviously we only want to select the fields from a specific album that we've specified. So now that we've done that, we need to think about security. We need to think about this here being passed without sanitization. So what we want to do is up here just redefine album ID and make that equal to album ID, but with the change that we cast it to an integer data type, and this will eliminate anything else. It will only allow integers to be inserted into our query, and that's extremely important when we think about SQL injection. Now another thing we need to do is we need to unset, using the unset language construct. This will essentially unset a value from an array, and what we want to do is we want to unset args 0, and this is the first element of the array. Now I'll just talk for a moment about the reason we need to do this. Unset is just going to delete the first element of the args, and this array takes the parameters from this function, remember. Now, because we've specified album ID, we don't need this to be included in fields. Remember, our fields implodes the args. We need to unset the first one, which is album ID, because we only want to select anything after here. Okay, so if we were to say album ID and then we were to specify the name and the description of our album, that's when we actually call the function, by the way, then we want to get rid of the album ID but still be able to use it here as well, which we can still do. We're just unsetting it from this args array. So hopefully that makes sense. You can go ahead and use print r on this, as we have done before, to see the change in data. So with them couple of simple changes, we've actually allowed us to take an album data and actually return it back. So let's go ahead into edit album, and we'll just run a few tests on this function that we've just created. So just in here, let's go ahead and print r, and the function name is obviously album data, and let's just specify we want to get the name and the description, so much like the user data function. So now that we've printed that, obviously we need to specify an album ID. So before here we actually need to grab the value from here, and that's obviously a get variable. It's unlike a post, well, similar to a post variable, but it's defined in the URL. So album ID is equal to 56. The variable name is album ID. So what we can do is we can set album ID equal to $_get album ID. Okay, so what this will do, we'll just echo that out and comment that out for now. We're going to echo this out and we'll see how that works. You can see that we've got 56, which corresponds to this here. If we change this value here, say 560, that changes as well. So this is where we're taking the album ID from, and we can use that inside of our function. So let's go ahead and get rid of that echo. So we're printing the album data function. We feed in the album ID, because remember, album ID is the first value fed into this function. Let's just get rid of users.func.php. The first value fed into this function. The rest of the fields are what we are getting from the funcGetArgs function.